This week, we have some deep realizations that we must have in order to move on from one subject, in order to properly release ourselves from a part of our lives that is draining and exhausting. This week, we have a lot of conjunctions to the South Node. And the South Node is often releasing, it is often draining and exhausting, but sometimes you have to look backwards in order to go forward. You can't understand the future without understanding the past. We're starting Monday off with the moon in Scorpio making an opposition to Jupiter, and then later in the evening making an opposition to Uranus. As the moon's in Scorpio and our emotions are fraught, our emotions are intense, and they feel, we feel stuck in them. We feel, lethargic. We feel empty. The moon going opposite Jupiter is, again, you have to do the dirty work in order to reap the rewards. Most of you by now probably know I'm a big Alex Hormozy fan. The thing is here, he says the magic that you're looking for is in the work that you're avoiding. And I think about that statement a lot, especially related to just personal development stuff. But as the moon's in Scorpio, this is that work. And it's going to go opposite Jupiter, where Jupiter is saying hey, do you want these rewards? Do you want this growth? Do you want this area of your life to look nice? Well, this is what it requires. And there's a resistance to that. If you, I remember being a kid and I hated working as a kid. I've been working since I was 12 years old because we had an orchard, and I've told people I used to bale hay in the summers. I don't know if you've ever baled hay before, but it is literally the worst thing ever. And it sucked at the time, but I wanted money. I was getting I think $5 an hour or something like that. And so the moon in Scorpio opposite Jupiter is the level. It is being emotionally drained. It is being emotionally exhausted. It is being upset about the circumstances. But there has to come a moment where you have to say, this is the work that it requires. This is the work that is required to get the result that you want. It's the same thing if you ever want to start a YouTube channel and you're afraid of what people's opinions are going to be. You're afraid of how people are going to see you. Well, guess what? You're going to have to get over that, and you're going to have to get over your bullshit. So as the moon goes opposite Jupiter on Monday, there is this kind of uncomfortability, but knowing that there are rewards for this, but you will be emotionally resistant. As we get to the later part of the evening on Monday and the moon goes opposite Uranus, this is a breakdown or a breakthrough. Sometimes, I do love the saying breakdowns lead to breakthroughs. Sometimes you need to absolutely snap. And what I mean by snap is not emotionally shove everything down, but let it come out. Let yourself be in the moment with your emotions. And the moon opposite Uranus has that level of energy to it. Now, sometimes you need to just snap and someone needs to put you in your place and you need to get checked. And you can go back to being normal. But the other way I'd look at this is have you ever wanted to give up? I know you have. We've all wanted to give up. But it's the times in which we don't give up and we see it through and we know that we want to give up and we just go a little bit longer. There's some reward for what we have done. I think I forgot what the saying is, but it's right when you want to give up is the time that you absolutely need to start, keep going. And I look at that with the moon in Scorpio opposite Uranus, where there is a level of wanting to give up, but if you don't and you keep persevering, there is some reward there. And it's an opposition, right? This could involve doing something differently. This could involve being innovative, but this could just involve, in my opinion, like I said last week, being so angry and so upset at your emotions that you never want to feel a certain way again, so you're willing to do things as radically different as possible. Monday is a very interesting emotional day, and so I would allow yourselves to go through that time and not act out in a way that is going to harm you or harm others, but I would advocate for you feeling those emotions and knowing that that is a part of the work, that is a part of the journey here. I know some people say that I'm really negative in my astrology, and lately I've been thinking about how that has been such, I not on purpose, but I end up being kind of not a countercultural person, but what is it when you're you kind of just do the opposite of what everyone's saying? That's just kind of how I am. I try not to do it purposely, but there's so much positive astrology, and I think it's good. I think if you want to listen to a positive astrologer all day long, go for it. If that's going to help you, it's going to help you. But what I love about astrology is the fact that it allows a level of reality. Look at the times that we're in right now. This isn't, everything's peaceful and everyone's getting along. there are times that are a lot darker. And right now we're in the middle of eclipse season at this point. I'm recording this before the eclipse starts. And eclipse season is always a weird 2-week window where everything is really crazy. And the reason I find myself, and I don't even counter it as negative, it's just reality. Is it negative when you see a wolf, absolutely slaughter a deer? Is that negative or is that reality? I think that involves negativity, but how negative is it for the wolf to survive? I don't know. That's not for me to answer. I don't know if that's for you to answer either, but it's for you to chew on. And so the reason I'm saying all of this is, I'm going to be making a delineation here soon about the whole thing going on, in Israel and everything like that. And it's just one of those things where I feel vindicated in the sense that, like, I've been talking about, like, hey, World War III is going to be happening. Hey, everything's getting crazy. And, I've been told that I've been wrong and that, I'm being too negative. Yet here we fucking are. And so I'm so thankful for astrology that gives me the weather map. Monday's going to be a little bit of a rough and emotional day. And that's okay. It is okay to be upset. It is okay to be angry. It is okay to feel pain. And what I don't like, and one of my issues with, again, the mostly, positive astrology is it's that, oh, we can never feel bad. Oh, we can never have negative emotions. Oh, it can only be love and light. Nothing ever bad can ever happen to you because you're perfect. It is okay to be upset. It is okay to have a bad day. It is okay to have bad experiences, because guess what? We all go through them. Would you rather have a tool that vindicates that and validates that, or would you rather have a tool that completely erases that from your existence, that pretty much denies that history of you, that denies that emotion, and to where it's like you're the one being wrong. You're the one who's not in alignment with the universe because you're not on a positive vibe. You're not on a higher thing. I just have a lot of, I guess I'm a little emotional right now because it's just one of the things where, as we go into the next few years, and the thing I want to talk about in my delineation with the Israeli thing is people's emotions are so stirred into this that they're allowing themselves to think things, and this is for both sides, to think and justify things that they shouldn't. And I think one of the major tests of these next few years, as we see more war, as we see more chaos, is controlling your emotions. And what's a good day to do that is Monday. The moon's going to be in Scorpio. You're going to feel a certain way. You're going to feel angry. You're going to feel upset. And it's okay to feel that way. But it's up to you on how you handle those actions. It's up to you to what you do with those emotions. And that's where responsibility and accountability lie. For me, I was a very emotionally upset kid. I was very angry all the time. And it took me getting my ass kicked by both, bullies at school, my parents, the law, like police, for me to realize I have to control my emotions and I'm responsible for my actions. And so on Monday, you're going to feel upset. You need to see the bigger picture. It is okay to feel upset, but where the boundary is what you do off of those. Are you going to do good with those negative emotions, or are you going to do bad with those negative emotions? I think Monday is a perfect opportunity to check yourself before you wreck yourself. Tuesday, we have the moon in Scorpio making a trine to Neptune. It will then ingress into Sagittarius and square Saturn. So the moon trining Neptune in Scorpio, I always think of it as kind of like when we have a past, traumatic experience, and we can distort what that experience was, whether it's forgetting certain things, because trauma makes us forget certain stuff, or we still have the emotional connection to it because it was a physical trauma, but we can't really remember what that is. Like the moon trining Neptune, or at least just the moon contacting Neptune, is kind of like, I feel a certain way. However, I might be distorting it in a way that may not necessarily be the truth. What I do think it's good for is the moon making a trine to Neptune is allowing the pain to be a creative outlet. Meaning, okay, like I said last week, you never want to feel this way again, right? Sweet. What are you going to do with it? The other day I had to get a homeless guy tried to break into my building. And I was going up through the garage, and I opened the garage. This guy was walking. He wasn't even homeless. He was a tweaker, by the way. I could tell the difference. Been around that shit my whole fucking life. And he just bolts straight into the garage. So I lay on the horn, and I roll down the window. And I was like, hey, get the fuck out of here. He's like, no, I live here. I was like, no, you fucking don't, get the fuck out of here. And he was like, fuck you, man. And he ran away. And as a guy, every guy does this, every girl does this in some capacity, but maybe in a different context, is when a guy gets faced with some sort of like aggression or confrontation and it gets settled, we then imagine 10,000 scenarios in which it got escalated and we win. And all I thought about was like, man, if that guy fucking did something to me, I'd beat the shit out of him. And if he did that, like, then I would do this. And, you know, and of course, all these instances I won every event, right? Because that's just how the ego plays out. But that's how I look at the moon in Scorpio trining Neptune, is that, you know, in that moment, I was so like pumped up. Like this guy, and there was another small woman who lives here who was trying to get in too, and she saw that, and she was like, she saw it from the outside. She didn't see me, and she was like, "Oh, I'm really glad that you were there, because then I would have to chase that guy outside, and like, heaven forbid she had to do that, because this is a fucking tweaker. Like, I don't give a shit how, you know, you're like, oh, we need to care for the addicts. It's like, addicts take drugs and they have no liability for their actions. They are not responsible for their actions according to most law, and you know, pretty much, you know, I see fentanyl addicts out here all the time, screaming, yelling at people, and no one does anything. And, you know, even though I seen a fentanyl addict literally start screaming and yelling at a woman and children, no one gives a shit. And so I get really protective of my community and the people that are around me about that shit. And also, I've had tweakers in my family. I've been around that shit my whole life. I do not have tolerance for it. So maybe that's a little bit, you know, negative, and maybe I'm just kind of riffing off here. But what I'm trying to get to is, in that moment, I was so pumped up about that. I was so angry because like my emotions were charged. Like I went in defensive mode instantaneously, to where then I then imagined all these other scenarios that could have possibly played out. And was it delusional? Yes. But was it a, you know, fear safety mechanism that was a part of my like ancestral DNA? Probably. But why I'm bringing this up is that moon trine Neptune, when your emotions are, you know, are so deep and they're so triggered, you then start imagining all these other scenarios. And maybe you're the victor in all these scenarios. Maybe you're not the victor in all these scenarios. But I think of that example for Tuesday with the moon trining Neptune. You might be a little bit in your head and playing out all these scenarios. That's fine. But they may not necessarily be reality. When we get to the moon ingressing into Sagittarius, there's some freedom. There is some, you know, wanting to move forward, but it immediately makes a square to Saturn. Saturn's at like 0 degrees by this point, I believe. Saturn's getting really, really close to stationing direct. I kind of been loving this moon in Sag squaring Saturn, even though I'm a big Sagittarius, you know, fan. Like the whole, I mean, I'm a Sag rising. I just love the whole idea of everything. But what I love about these moon ingresses that then square Saturn is like, you know, wherever you go, there you are. It doesn't matter how much you want to dream. It doesn't matter how far you want to go. You've got to handle things right here and there. It's like, okay, sure, you want to dream of being X, Y, and Z. Who do you have to be to get there? Who do you spiritually have to be? How do you internally have to be the person that you want to be? Because the person that you want to be is not the person who you are today. And that's just the reality. And so on Tuesday, as the moon goes into Sag and square Saturn, the question is, okay, if I want to go in this direction, if I want to explore, if I want to know what my target is, who do I have to be in that moment? Is it moon in Scorpio reactionary, or is it moon in Sag seeing a little bit more of the bigger picture? Is it more Saturn and Pisces of being more emotionally responsible for how you know, deal with like your, again, more the yin, more in the internal spiritual side of things? It's like, you could say you're spiritual, but are you like really doing that work? And what I mean by that work is, it's not always just sitting down there and meditating. It's not always just, you know, doing yoga or whatever. Like a lot of it's just internal discipline right now with Saturn and Pisces. So Tuesday's interesting. There's a lot of like imaginative scenarios that then lead into, well, that's not going to happen. You can't just, you know, escape that. Like, who do you have to be to become that? Who do you have to be? It's like the moon and Sag may want to like act on all of those scenarios that you just played out, but Saturn and Pisces saying like, no, that's not who you are. Like, who do you have to be? And then after that, the moon is just hanging out in Sagittarius for Tuesday. We get to Wednesday, and clearly I'm feeling fucking something right now. And I think it's just because, again, there's just a lot going on in the world right now, and it's eclipse season at this point. Maybe I'm feeling nervous, maybe I'm feeling anxious, but I'm also just, you know, I don't know. I guess it's just, there's a level of things being very real that, in my mind, or at least the way that I'm interpreting the world, that is forcing me to be more maybe disgruntled, or, you know, maybe just a little bit more protective, or, you know, I'm skeptical. And so, you know, for you guys that have been watching me for a long time, if you're getting, you know, annoyed or frustrated, I apologize. But something I love about having a YouTube channel and becoming a YouTuber is if you ever want to do a YouTube channel, you have to be authentic. And I would much rather be very raw and real as I can with you guys than hide behind a facade that I'm some sort of spiritual guru that knows everything, that I'm some sort of, sure, I might be able to have some authority position in the astrology space because I just know a lot about it. But like, I'm not some spiritual authority. I'm not someone that's going to tell you whether you're, the good guy or the bad guy. That's all for you guys to decide. But I would rather be real and raw and authentic on here with how I feel and deal with the consequences of that than be, a liar and hide behind a facade and deal with the consequences of that. If I lose people, I lose people. That's just how it goes. But at least I get to sleep at night knowing that I wasn't hiding behind anything. So you guys are just getting a little bit more of a raw piece of me today. So I'll shut up and I'll keep going because now we're like 20 minutes into this, okay? Wednesday, the moon will make a square to Venus as it's in Sagittarius. As it squares Venus, the moon in Sag again, wanting to escape, wanting to dream, wanting to, see the best in everything. As it makes that square to Venus in Virgo, it's like, I always look at Sagittarius and Virgo as like, I always have this analogy of like, if all of the zodiac signs went hiking, what would they be like? And Virgo's like, I've got my sunscreen, I've got my, granola bar, I've got my visor, I've got my hiking boots, I've got my, all that stuff and like, making sure everything's in order versus Sagittarius is just like, they're already like a mile ahead of everybody. They're just going off, like not even really worried about anything else. And so Venus being in Virgo, where Venus is about, again, pleasure and fun and connection, and she's in Virgo, and there's this kind of like, well, maybe I don't have all the materials that I need that would make me feel more comfortable, but what can I do with this? The moon making that square to Venus is kind of like, this isn't working the way that maybe I want to. This isn't as fun as I want it to be. This isn't as beautiful as I want it to be. But my angst, my, ambition is going to drive me to do it anyway. Well, I actually might even look at that as the reverse, is like your ambition and your angst makes you want to drive, but there's something holding you back, which is, this isn't as enjoyable as I want it to be. This isn't as fun as I want it to be. Everything's not up to the level of which I want it to be. And so there's this kind of like overthinking, nervousness, and anxiousness, I think, on Wednesday with the moon squaring Venus. But then we have two of our highlights on Wednesday. We have the sun conjoining the south node and Mercury conjoining the south node. The sun will conjoin the south node first thing in the morning, and Mercury will conjoin the south node later on in the evening. So it's kind of a double whammy. The sun being our willpower and our vitality and our energy, it's in Libra, it's in its sign of fall, it is at its weakest. And it will be conjoining the south node, which also takes like strength away. There is this kind of not having the willpower to like fight, not having the energy to, put up a fight. It is very much like I'm feeling at a low point energetic wise even with my own ego. But then Mercury conjoins the south node. And again, this is all Libra stuff. So we are talking about what is diplomatic. What does justice mean? And I think a lot of us, when I say a lot of us, the people that are very engulfed in the situation with Israel, these are things people are thinking about. Mercury's in Libra. We're thinking about what is just, what is diplomatic, what is fair, what is reasonable. And it conjoins the south node. When I'm going to make this delineation episode, something I'm going to talk about is how everyone's saying war crimes this, war crimes that on both sides, which is totally true. But like war crimes don't matter. I don't know if you guys have picked that one up yet. Like the Americans killed 1 million innocent Iraqi civilians, and also we created ISIS, and I like the idea of the law doesn't matter with Mercury conjoining the south node in Libra. I mean, you can look at that if you've ever been in a lawsuit before, if you ever had to deal with, child custody, if you've ever had to deal with police, you realize there's a level of the law that genuinely doesn't matter. It can if you escalate it, but there's this kind of like giving up mentality here. And I don't know if I could sit here and say if giving up is the right idea. There are times where there are fights that are worth fighting, and there are times where there are fights not worth fighting. And I'm saying that separate to what's going on right now in like the whole Israel thing. But Mercury conjoining the south node is maybe having a click and saying, for example, I thought it was really funny when people brought up the war crimes in Israel as if the Geneva Convention, totally said that, people need to be, aware of what they're injecting into their bodies. And, I don't know if you guys know, but the whole, forced inoculation thing was actually a war crime and went against the Geneva Convention, or my bad, the Nuremberg trials. My bad, Nuremberg trials. And so there's just times where these things don't matter. And I kind of look at the sun conjoining South Node and Mercury conjoining the South Node as like, in your own personal life, on a personal development level, and this is why I've been saying, I've been saying since like earlier this year before the nodes moved into Aries and Libra, like the whole North Node in Aries and South Node in Libra is like peace was never an option. It never was, which is so striking given the situation that's going on right now. It's so funny almost. I don't think people dying is funny, but what I do think is funny is just how symbolic astrology is sometimes. And so I look at this as kind of like, at what point do you have to say, me doing things in this way, the Libra way, is not going to work, and maybe I do need to be more of this Aries way. Maybe you do need to just take more initiative and charge and action in your own life and not worry about, the balance of things or if things are fair. And I'm not saying play dirty. I'm not saying cheat. I'm not saying do any of stuff that is out of integrity. But you have to understand what the game you're playing is. If you're in a situation in which, and again, this is what I think Wednesday is about, is realizing that maybe the rules and the law and the order aren't going to, let me be really careful what I'm saying here. I'm not saying this on like a literal way, like break the law. Well, I won't say anything beyond that. What I am saying though is, if there is a way in which you are doing things that you are slowly realizing aren't going to move you forward, I think Wednesday is the day to check in and say, how far is this going to get me? How much farther is this going to take me? I think the other thing is Mars just entered Scorpio like last night, and it's in my 12th house, so maybe I'm just on a sick one right now. But Wednesday is, I think, the day to check in and say, what is this road eventually take me down, and how far is it going to get me? If you're playing Monopoly with everyone and no one is playing by the rules, but you are, you can be in integrity, and that's good for you. But you have another option, which is just not playing the game. You don't have to lie and cheat and steal, but you also don't have to play the game. So we get to Thursday, and the moon in Sagittarius will make a square to Neptune. It will sextile Mercury. It will ingress into Capricorn, and then it will sextile Saturn. And we have the Mercury Cazimi. So let's talk about these moon transits real quick. The moon will make this square to Neptune. The biggest thing, and again, it's hard for me not to use the analogy, and being analogous with what is currently going on, is like the first casualty of war is truth. I'm going to have a lot of examples for that in my delineation episode, because it's really funny how everyone is just believing every small thing that they're seeing on the news right now, when we have quite a long and vast history of nothing but lies for war propaganda. But I look at the moon squaring Neptune as saying, something's not lining up here. Sure, you may have, for example, everyone, like, it's kind of like, there's like a meme where it's like you're drinking with your buddies and they have like a business plan. They're like, oh, we're going to open up this business and it's going to be like that. It'll be so cool. We'll make all this money. But then you go, okay, well, how do we start that? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And then the business never goes anywhere. It is much easier for someone to dream up something and not take action on it than it is to actually do something about it. And the thing is, the moon's in Sag making a square to Neptune. If you're going to dream about it, you need to be really clear about what your target is. You can't just say, oh, this is just where it's going to be. This is just where I'm going. You have to have some clarity on that. And I think the moon in Sag making a square to Neptune is maybe checking in saying, what does that look like? Let's say you just want to start a restaurant. Okay, well, do you know how much it costs to buy restaurant equipment? Do you have the license? Do you have the, business permit? Can you afford rent? How much of a loan are you taking out? And so I'm a big advocate of dreaming, having a vision, but don't gas yourself into just saying, oh, it's going to be super easy. You need to take the time to understand what steps that it entails. And I believe the moon squaring Neptune is kind of that realization of like, oh, this maybe not be as easy as I expected it to be. Then the moon sextiles Mercury in Libra. Well, who are the people that you have around you? Who are the people that, can assist this? And this comes with a caveat, because this is the Mercury Cazimi that we're having on this day. This is the clarity moment where I think it's kind of like one of those things where maybe you've had a friend in your life and you've kind of thought, I don't know if this friend is good for me, but, I love them. We have all of this history, and that's like Mercury conjoining the South Node, is maybe feeling that or feeling drained by this friend. And then the Mercury Cazimi happens where you kind of go, oh, this isn't actually my fucking friend. This actually isn't someone that is supportive of me. There is a realization and a clarity that comes in after you feel the low point of the Mercury South Node on Wednesday, and on Thursday we get the Mercury Cazimi, where you kind of go, oh, that is what's not fair. That is what's not in balance. That is what is not just. And so when the moon in Sagittarius is making a square to Mercury, there's this kind of like, maybe giving a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Maybe even, again, like Mercury Cazimis are like clarity conversations. They are some sort of form of communication coming in, whether it's a light bulb in your head or someone speaking to you. And this is in Libra, so this could just be someone speaking to you. But there's something here that clicks. Then the moon goes into Capricorn. We shut off our emotions. We build that little wall. And the moon sextiles Saturn in Pisces. There's this level of Thursday as the Mercury Cazimi hits and the moon ingresses into Capricorn where all of a sudden shit gets serious. And that might just be going into business mode. Like, it's kind of like, you know, maybe you're nervous about a job interview, but then you get to the job interview and you're like, I'm ready for this. It's just an appropriate level of maturity walking into a situation. And Thursday's more like Thursday morning's more maybe jovial, maybe just seeing things in a bigger picture and having more fun. And then when the moon goes into Capricorn, it's time to get serious. Then we get to Friday, and on Friday the moon in Capricorn will sextile Mars and trine Venus and trine Jupiter. I like Friday. I like Friday a lot. Mars is in Scorpio now. There is a level of tenacity and drive and ambition that we just want to sink our teeth into. You know, have you ever been so angry that you go and do stuff? Like, you actually are productive because you're so pissed? I always make the analogy of like cleaning your house or cleaning your room, but have you ever been like pissed? And so you're like, fuck it. I just need to clean something. I just need to do something with my hands. Or like, you're so angry that something that you've been putting off for a while, you actually do it because you have nothing else to do and you just need to do something. That's how I look at the moon. That's how I look at Mars in Scorpio. But the moon making that sextile to Mars in Capricorn is like, this is healthy. Like, the moon in Capricorn, detach from the emotions for a minute. Just take care of the responsibilities that you have. It will then make a trine to Venus and a trine to Jupiter. I think on Friday, when we just kind of like, again, moon in Capricorn, we don't need to be as sensitive. We don't need to be as, empathetic. We need to just kind of like, hey, reserve our emotions, because our emotions are a resource and they are a very finite resource. They come and they go, they change, and our emotions can control us in so many different ways. And what I love about the moon in Capricorn is it allows us a time to not be so, be victims of our own emotions. And, it's like, one day you can just be upset and, it's like the thing with road rage. It's like road rage is just people that can't control their emotions, and they're so tied into it that they end up doing something stupid. They do something ridiculous. And so I think the moon in Capricorn is a great time to allow us to like detach, like have a healthy boundary around there. It's not good for empathizing. It's not good for sympathizing. It's not good for, trying to be emotionally relatable. But what it is good for is not having our emotions dictate what our actions are. However, the moon in Capricorn, being like, okay, like I need to have a little bit of a wall here. It's getting offered healthy channels for activity. Sextiling Mars, trine Venus, trine Jupiter. It's like, hey, get something done that you need to get done. Invest your time into something that you care about. The moon will trine Venus. I think this is like, sure, the moon is in detriment and Venus is in detriment, or I should say Venus is in fall technically, but they're trining with one another. Hey, this isn't the best circumstances, but you can get something, done. For example, there's been plenty of times where like I've been really upset and I didn't know what to do, so I just like wanted to escape through like making music, and I was like pissed the whole time, and then like I ended up tweaking some stuff where I'm like, oh, like sweet, for whatever reason I fixed the one thing that I couldn't fix for a long time, and now I'm happy again. That's how I look at the moon making that trine to Venus, and then trining Jupiter, where you're like, okay, maybe everything is okay. Maybe I do feel a little bit better. And if I'm just grounded and I'm reserved, I can make the, more forward steps that I need to. And I think that's important because the sun is in its fall, and the moon, both of the luminaries are at a weak point right now. So this sense of willpower and the sense of energy is not really all the way there. So you have to find the outlets that are going to create that energy within you. And on Friday, Mercury squares Pluto. I think the thing with Mercury squaring Pluto really is like, it's kind of like realizing the banker in the Monopoly game is taking all of the money and no one else cares, and they're all in on it and you're not. Mercury squaring Pluto, we'll probably hear more stuff about the Israel stuff. That's a tale as old as time. Like, I think me saying like, oh, we'll hear more about the Israel, Palestine stuff. It's like, yeah, well, that's been going on for thousands of years. So, that doesn't really count. But I think Mercury making a square to Pluto is there is something about it where Mercury is in the superior position to Pluto. Now, again, I've made this comment before, and I had a lot of comments that disagreed with me on this, which is mind-blowing. Pluto is at the last degrees of Capricorn. Every institution is corrupt. Say it with me. Every institution is corrupt. There are no institutions that are being integral. This is the massive breakdown of governments, of, institutions, of corporations. And I look at Mercury in Libra squaring Pluto as at least a small glimmer of hope. And the reason I say that is Mercury in Libra is kind of like, this goes against the law, and it's squaring Pluto in Capricorn. Like maybe you hear some, and again, let me bring this back to a personal level. Well, I'm going to take it to a personal level by using this analogy. It's kind of like Mercury in Libra squaring Pluto. You're going to hear something where people are saying like, oh, this is not just, this is against the law, but it's Pluto in Capricorn. Lockheed Martin and Raytheon don't really care about what's just. Also, there's so many other powers that be about this situation. Anyway, Mercury, on a more personal level, there is a connection with saying there is a more just way to go about this. There is a more, I don't like using the word equal or equitable because those words have been hijacked, and they don't carry the importance and the weight that they should anymore because of the co-opting and the hijacking of those words. So what I would say more is there's a more diplomatic resolution. There is a more peaceful way to go about it. But as Mercury squares Pluto, there's also a contact with saying, oh, it's kind of like, again, Mercury conjoining the South Node. Okay, this is like no one's playing by the rules. Mercury squaring Pluto is going, I see how they're not playing by the rules. I see how the system is corrupted. Now, whether or not you do something about that, I don't know. But on a more personal level, I think Mercury squaring Pluto is asking yourself, are you going to live in fear? Are you going to be overpowered by, again, the corruption of the institutions? Are you going to let yourself tie into that fear? Or are you going to try to see a more balanced view on things? I would really recommend having nuance in this time. I would really recommend discharging yourself from your emotions. Like something I want to say at the beginning of this delineation is like, there has never been a time more than now to say that it is okay to not have an opinion. It is totally okay. Doesn't mean that you can't have an opinion, but it is also okay to not have one. And I look at Mercury in Libra squaring Pluto as kind of like maybe even not playing the game, like in the Monopoly game. Maybe not even, wanting to choose a side and just trying to see a situation that says, okay, like Capricorn is institutions and governments and corporations, right? But Libra makes the superior square to Capricorn. Those things can only exist by law. The government, technically the federal government was only supposed to like help, citizens and stuff. Like it's supposed to be very limited, and it's supposed to be like pretty much there to, enforce the laws of the land, to make sure people have like, peace and justice, essentially. I'm overgeneralizing here, but you guys get the idea. And I just think as Mercury in Libra squares Pluto is that there's this kind of just connect with like, what could justice look like? What could peace look like? What could these kind of things look like? But in order to do that, you have to see the monster for what it is. And something I really like, I'm going to have Gordon White on my podcast here soon again, and I'm going to be on his show here very soon too. But something he says a lot that I couldn't agree more with is that there is no political solution. And I think when you get that in your head, it makes understanding all of this stuff a little bit easier. But just Mercury square Pluto, I think at the very minimum is going to be frustrating. It's going to be like, for example, maybe another way to put this would be like, let's say you're playing the Monopoly game and someone's like, well, do you want in on the greed? Do you want in on the, the corruption? Are you going to take that? Are you going to allow yourself to be corrupted by a corrupt system? And let me, come back over what I said before. With Mercury and Libra conjoining the South Node, you might realize the rules to the game don't matter. And I look at the South Node in Libra and the North Node in Aries as like, that doesn't mean that you need to be corrupted. It just means that you need to realize the rules don't matter here. And you can make the decision of whether or not you want to play the game or not play the game. And I look at Mercury squaring Pluto as like really really going back and forth on that. Intense weekly horoscope. I feel like I haven't done one like this in a while. So sorry if you guys want something a little bit more peaceful here, but I'm just doing me. Saturday, the moon's going to make a trine to Uranus. It will conjoin Pluto and square Mercury. Saturday is kind of more of the same thing because the moon, again, making a trine to Uranus is like, okay, there's some sort of, innovative random thing. But then the moon conjoins Pluto and squares Mercury. So we're kind of coming back to this whole Mercury-Pluto square thing. And the moon conjoining Pluto is like, I feel like I have to do the thing. I feel like, I'm feeling overwhelmed and overpressured by, corrupt system, by power and influence. And it's going to square Mercury. You may understand, like, this isn't right. This isn't just. What am I doing here? And that's pretty much like the whole day the moon's doing that. So Saturday's kind of like a what's right and what's wrong here. Saturday, the sun will square Pluto. There is a level of, for example, there's times to fight and there's times to not fight. And I look at the sun in Libra being in its fallen sign squaring Pluto is kind of like, I watch this YouTube channels. Some of my boomer audience probably knows this channel, but there's this channel called Active Self-Protection. It's just like this guy who goes over video camera footage of people being victimized or defending themselves against, a robbery with a gun. And something he talks about a lot that is such good life advice is, holy shit, I'm going to forget it. I'm going to try my best to remember it. He pretty much says like, know your turn and take your turn. And what he means by that is, for example, let's say you're in a 7-Eleven and let's say someone comes in and they bring in a gun and they point it at you. And they point it at you because they're going to rob this guy, but they want to make sure you're okay. It is not your turn to defend yourself because if you do anything, he will shoot you. And you have to wait that one out. When he turns away and he's not looking at you, and maybe he puts his gun down, or maybe he does, then that is your turn, and you should take your turn. And I look at the sun squaring Pluto, and I'm going to tell you right now, if you've ever been victimized by a situation, it does not feel good to not be able to take your turn. When you are, like, have a gun to your face and you have something that you can't really defend against, it doesn't fucking feel good. It doesn't. And that's how I look at the sun squaring Pluto is like, know your turn, take your turn. This is not it. You don't have to make a decision. You don't have to react. Sometimes it is okay to like play dead. It's okay to be like, oh, I don't know anything. Sometimes it's okay to just walk away. Sure, you might wish that you could do something and it's going to piss you off that you couldn't do anything different. But that's how I look at the sun square Pluto is like, the sun is weak here and it's squaring Pluto where it's like, for example, also too, given the laws of the United States, depending on what state you are in, if that guy points a gun at you and then he turns around and points a gun at the other guy, and then let's say, you stab him or mace him or tase him or you shoot him, well, then you can be criminally liable and civilly held liable for being a victim. And that's how I look at this. Like, again, it's crazy how, victims are more so persecuted nowadays than actual criminals. And if you disagree with that, you're not actually familiar with how the law works. And that's a statement that, like, I'm sure I've rattled some feathers, but you're wrong on that one. But you have to understand what is the right situation. If someone's got a gun pointed at you and then you try to pull out like your gun, well, guess what? You're going to get shot quicker than you'll be able to get anything out. And did that really help anybody? Did that really do anything? Like sometimes you do have to be passive. Like sometimes you do have to, what I want to say, like, it's not give up, but you have to know your turn and then take your turn. But the biggest part of awareness is knowing when to do something. And I don't think when the sun squares Pluto, that is the time. Sun squaring Pluto is knowing that you don't have to pick a side, knowing that you don't have to, immediately run away or do whatever. But I think that's going to cause a lot of tension in us where we want to do something, but we can't. On Saturday, Venus also trines Jupiter. This is the good highlight of the week. And I just think as Venus is in Virgo, Venus is, again, love, romance, connection, fun. She's in Virgo. It may not be the best, but we're making it work. And she trines Jupiter where Jupiter is in Venus's sign. Jupiter in Taurus has been about what do we actually value? What actually gives us security? What actually gives us stability? What actually makes us feel grounded? And I think as Venus is in Virgo, where she's not getting everything that she wants, she's able to dial down more about what matters. For example, I heard a saying where it's like rich people aren't impressed much because they've gotten everything versus like if you ever came from like poverty, like, I mean, fucking everything's impressive. And I say that as like I think it's a good thing. It's like if you're raised by billionaires, it's like, oh, this fucking, Mercedes means nothing to me. And, whatever, it's just another Rolex. Like when you are without the luxuries in life, you have to figure out what are the things that you actually value. And if you have limited funds and you want to get yourself some nice, what is the actual thing that you value? And that's like Venus and Virgo. Maybe you have a small amount of money, but you want to do something fun with it. What is the thing that you actually value? And again, maybe it's not going to be perfect. Maybe you do have to get a used car, but hey, that's your fucking used car. Maybe you had to work your ass off to buy your first car and it's used and it's a piece of shit, but it's your piece of shit and you're proud. There's so much more like fun in that. And I look at Venus and Virgo as like, it's trining Jupiter is like, it's, what saying I've got stuck in my head. If you've ever seen Home Alone, I think it's Home Alone 2, but he's like your very own cheese pizza. That's how I feel about Venus and Virgo trining Jupiter, or more so like you get your first, piece of shit car and there's something fun. There's something so like, yes, this is mine and it's not perfect, but I value it so much because I've earned it, because I've worked for it, because I've really taken the time to figure out what do I value. And that's how I look at Venus trine Jupiter. Figure out what actually matters to you. And I think as Venus trines Jupiter, there's this connection of saying like, wow, when I go without resources, when I go without luxuries and I still have a need for something and I dial it down more specifically, I gain more reward for getting the thing I actually value and not just surface items that I don't actually really care about. Does that make sense? We get into Monday, we get into Sunday, and the moon is going to ingress into Aquarius. It will square Mars and square Jupiter. This is kind of weird. I think as the moon goes into Aquarius and squares Mars, there's a lot of, I think a good example is just what's going on right now. Never has there been, I don't want to say never has there been, but boy, there's the situation going on right now is there are two factions and two sides and they do not agree with one another. And that's just how I look at the moon in Aquarius squaring Mars. It just doesn't matter. Like, these two sides, if you pick a side and you stay on your side and you're on team, red, team blue, whatever it is, like, and that's the dichotomy that you choose to live in. This brings up all of that in my opinion. But as the moon, it goes into Aquarius and squares Mars, Mars is in the superior position here where there is a lot of, again, tension, violence. The moon will then make a square to Jupiter where you kind of realize, when things are divided, they don't really work out. That's how I look at this moon in Aquarius transit. But then also on Sunday, the moon, Mercury ingresses into Scorpio and trines Saturn. The only thing I really want to say about this, and again, this is another highlight of the week. Actually, I should star that. Are we going to be sharp with our tongues over this next, actually couple months, because Mercury is with Mars for like the rest of November, for a good part of December, because Mercury will leave Mars, but then Mercury will retrograde. It'll come back station direct on Mars right at the beginning of the year, and then Mercury's with Mars in Capricorn. We're going to be really sharp with our tongues and very upset for like a long time. Like Mercury conjoining Mars is like, I'm going to tell you fuck you, and I ain't going to fucking apologize, especially as it's in Scorpio. So what I think this is a good time for is to be a little kind. And you can be kind while also telling someone how the fuck it is. Okay? So I think as the Mercury goes into Scorpio, we're probably going to be saying things that shoot below the belt. But it will trine Saturn. Mercury going into Scorpio too is very investigative. Mercury going into Scorpio is very like, I want to see what's below the surface. I want to see what's beneath the surface. And I think as Mercury's in Scorpio and we are communicating from a point of our emotions, it's trining Saturn. We're like, this is again needed for the long term. If you are about conflict avoidance, well, guess what? You're not doing things that are going to be good for you in the long term. It's hard. It sucks. But I think just Mercury going to Scorpio, making that trine to Saturn is like knowing we need to look things deeper to get a better understanding of what's going on in here. Boy, I'm sure I've lost about half of you with everything that I've said. I'm sure I've pissed off a lot of you, but hey, I've made mistakes and also I've made bad videos and maybe this is a bad video. So whatever. Next week, we have the sun ingressing into Scorpio. Next week is fucking so wild. Next week, the sun goes into Scorpio, Mars goes opposite Jupiter, Mercury goes opposite Jupiter, Mercury conjoins Mars, and a lunar eclipse in Taurus, like literally all on the same day. So next week is explosive. Next week is absolutely wild. I think this is like a sexy Halloween weekend, but I also think it's an explosive one. So With that being said, I love and appreciate you guys. I'll be seeing you next week.